There it is. Crack the bottle top. No cans. Mike and I finally made it up north to the wintry wonderland that is Ohio right now. Just south of Dayton.
Here. Why do people live in places like this? It was single digits when we got out of the car last night.
But we're meeting up with our friend, the boss, a.k.a. Adam Norris. Finally got to come up here and be fun, like Mike was saying earlier. Sit down with somebody who's been on both sides of the activity.
Yeah, I think it's going to give a good perspective. Like, Adam is someone that marched for a long time. How many years was it?
I did 3 years of outdoor, and then I guess technically 4 years of indoor, but I really only count 2 of them.
Okay, we'll get into that later.
Yeah.
But so he's marched a ton, and then he made the transition almost immediately. Was there any break between marching and teaching?
Yeah, I aged out in 2010, and then I started teaching in 2011.
So he probably has a perspective that only someone like that has done that has marched a ton and then went straight into teaching. I'm sure there were a lot of eye-opening things you didn't get or didn't know were the way they were as a member.
Yeah, that's one way to put it.
All right.
I
well,
suppose.
before we get into that and let you introduce yourself, welcome everyone to the Aged Out Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Mike Fantini, and with me as always is
Evan Worrell, and like we said, our good friend Adam. But you came from Louisville, right? Or was just
Shepherdsville. Yeah, nobody. I always say Louisville because nobody knows where Shepherdsville is.
That's fair. When you're in Kentucky and you're not living in like Lexington or Louisville, everybody refers to it as like counties.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
Like, oh, I'm
that's
from
a very
so-and-so
Kentucky
county
thing.
So when you go out of state and you're like, oh, I'm from so-and-so county, they're like, well, what city is that?
Yeah, where is that? I don't know. I don't know where Bullitt County is.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
I forgot.
We'll start as we always do. We'll let Adam Norris here introduce himself a little bit, and we'll start with a rundown of his background in the activity, a little bit of how he got into it, and then we'll just see where that takes us.
Well, I started drumming when I was in 5th grade, and I started drumming because when I tried to play the saxophone, I couldn't make any sound.
That's a good reason to stop.
Yeah, well, I saw right through it immediately, and so I just said, you know what, give me the drumsticks. I think I'll try that. And it worked out. That's one of those, you look back and you realize like such a small decision when you're like 11 years old has like completely changed the course of my entire life. And 11-year-old me was like at the helm trying to like navigate. But that was why I started playing drums. So I did band in middle school and I liked it. And I started, my high school band was very small. I went to Bullitt East High School, which actually now is doing really well. There's actually a Blue Stars alumni, Trevor
Irvin.
Irvin is the band director, and he has done some crazy good work. They like were winning grand champions. They like almost went to state this year, I think. Like it's been really impressive what he's been able to do. So, Trevor, if you're listening, man, it's like I'm very proud to be an alumni of that program. So it's pretty cool. But so I went there for high school. The band was really small, so we had to march. A lot of schools will do like they'll march their 8th graders. We had to march our 7th graders to like get the numbers up. And I think that
get the bodies.
The biggest band when I was there was like 45 people like on the field, including the drum majors and the guard and everything.
I'm going to pause you for a second and point something out. I want to use this as an example of you don't have to come from an all-star program to achieve at a high level. If you have the drive and desire and the ability to do it, your band program in high school can be 20 people. And if you want it bad enough, you can still get there. All right, that's my public service announcement. Continue.
Well, so we had a really small band. I started high school marching band when I was in 7th grade. So I did 6 years of high school marching band with the Bullitt East Marching Chargers. And this was back before you had to have like a show design. Like we didn't have a show. Our shows didn't have titles. It was just the show.
Yeah, I just picked out charts and you
So
play
like our first, like the opener was Pero Caliente, and the second movement was, the rousing rendition of Secret Agent Man and things like that. Like
it was like almost like a college show.
Just like random stuff, and then eventually it got a little better. But I got into drum corps in the music downloading days of like Napster and Kazaa, where you basically download a computer virus that like allowed you to listen to music for free.
LimeWire.
And we had this program called, I hope the RIAA isn't listening, but I had this program called Kazaa, and my brother showed it to me. He's a little older, and he was like, "Oh, you can download all this stuff." So we're downloading Creed and all this crappy music because we were kids. We didn't know any better.
Oh man.
And I remember when I was in high school, I saw big high school drum lines and big high school programs like Lafayette in Kentucky or Henry Clay or Dunbar, like all the big Kentucky bands. And I remember seeing them and thinking, like, I was in this tiny band. We weren't really that good. There was a lot of, like, passion, but we didn't have the money. We didn't have the instruction. We didn't have the resources. So it was just, we were kind of stuck.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing these other bands and thinking, is this it? Like, am I just resigned to this because of where I was born and that's it, you know? And I remember thinking, like, I saw a band, I think it was like Seneca or something back in the day, and they had like 5 snares, and I was like, whoa. You know what I mean? Like, that like blew me away. And so I went to a music store to buy some sticks or something like that. And I asked the guy about drumming, like what there was further, and he was like, well, have you ever heard of drum corps? And I was like, no.
Nope.
I didn't know what it was. And he was like, yeah, you should check it out. He talked about Southwind, and I like pretended to know what he was talking about. I was like, oh yeah, totally, Southwind.
Who used to be a corps out of Lexington.
Yeah. And so, but I didn't know anything about him, and I didn't know what it was. So I went home and I got on Kazaa and I typed in drumline to like the search engine to see what would show up.
Because this was before YouTube.
This is pre-YouTube. This is pre-internet. I used
Kids now don't even know.
Yeah, I was like chiseling drumline into a stone and holding it up in the air and hoping I got a response. And so I looked it up and I got all these results and it kept saying DCI Blue Devils and then whatever, Diddy, Flam Sandwich, some, you know, 13th Hour, like all this old Blue Devil stuff. But I saw DCI and I didn't know what it stood for, but I saw Blue Devils and I saw the D of DCI. So I'm like, oh, Duke College something? Blue Devils. Like the Duke Blue Devil, of course. And I was like, I need to go to college at Duke, man. Their drumline is awesome. And
that's hilarious.
I didn't know anything about it. And then so I remember I was like a sophomore and maybe I was a freshman. I don't remember. It was way back in the day. This was right when like cable internet and DSL and everything like became a thing. Mm-hmm. And so we got like a broadband connection and you could search for videos on Kazaa. And so I searched for drumline videos and it came up with the DVD rip of Cavaliers from 2000 and 2001. And I think this was in 2003 when this is happening.
Yeah, probably.
So this is like, it seems old now, but at the time those were like the shows that had just been like the championship shows. Niagara Falls and Four Corners were the ones that I saw. And I was like, oh my God, this is the most insane thing I've ever seen. And I would just watch them on a loop. I was so pulled into it. And so through that, I just started to search a little bit more and I kind of figured out, you know, what DCI was through that. And then we had a color guard instructor who was, I don't think she'd ever marched, but she knew all about drum corps and everything. And so she invited like myself and some other people in our band that were like sort of the more leadership members of the band to go to what was the Indianapolis regional that they used to have. And it was at the end of July. It was like what Atlanta is now.
Yeah,
it was like
RCA
that.
Dome.
Yeah, it was at the RCA Dome. And so we went up there and I got to watch Drum Corps 2003 late season lives. Like Cavs were there. It was a regional.
Yeah.
So like I saw Spin Cycle live.
The Phenomenon of Cool.
The Phenomenon of Cool. Vanguard Pathways.
Cadets did the, I don't know the show.
It was our favorite things. Yeah. And it was just, it blew me away to like see that. I was like, I had never seen anything like that in my life. It was like, I was totally hooked at that point. And so I just stuck with it through high school. And so the next year I said, I want to march Cavaliers. So the next year was when they did the 007.
What year was that?
04.
04?
04 was the 007. So they had done...
Your first year auditioning for Drum Corps was 04?
I auditioned in 2004 for 2005.
You old man.
I know, right?
2004, that would have been Mark Worth, right?
Yeah, he had aged out. And so... I'll get to that in a second, but so I went to the show the next year, and I went with like my parents and my buddy from high school, and you know we were, you know, just like mouth open, like oh my God, this is amazing, and so my dad was a big fan, and my mom really enjoyed it as well. So it was cool, like they were kind of into it, and they saw how into it I was, so they were kind of
supportive.
Yeah, and it was awesome. They were really really supportive of it. So I told my dad that I wanted to march Cavaliers. I was pretty convinced. Like I said, I went to a small high school, and I was definitely the best in my high school. That's not saying much, though. You know what I'm saying? I was like a two-legged guy at a one-legged race. You know what I mean?
Big
like
fish in a small pond.
Exactly. And so it wasn't it wasn't like I had a ton, like I wasn't that great, but I was definitely the best. So I had nothing to compare it to because I'd never done anything extra. And so I'm like pretty convinced. I'm like 15, 16. I'm like, yeah, I think I can make it. Like, I think this is going to happen. And that's not to say that, you can't make it when you're that young, but I didn't have any of that experience whatsoever. So this was back before they did all the satellite camps and everything. And so we did, my dad, it was the morning after Thanksgiving. And like 5 a.m, me and my dad got in the car and he drove me to Chicago and we went to the Cavaliers camp. There wasn't, they didn't have
Everyone
videos
goes.
And if you wanted to do a video audition, you had to like get permission from the corps director, film it on your VHS thing and like mail it in and hopefully they got it. So this was like, everybody was there. So there's like, I don't know, I think there was like 20,000 snare drummers there or something ridiculous.
Sounds about right. That's usually how it is. Like 6 quad players, 3 bass drummers, and 100,000 snare drummers.
Yeah, like the rest of the camp was exclusively snare drummers. And I remember walking in, like feeling really confident. And then the first dude I saw was like twice my size with like a beard. And I was like 15, So I was just like, okay. And so we were sitting in this hallway and everybody has their pads out and they're playing. And I was like, oh my God, literally everyone I can see is like playing stuff I've never heard of or seen in my life. Like, what have I got myself into? And so that was the first camp I went to. You mentioned Andrew Markworth. He probably doesn't remember this. I think I mentioned it to him once. But he was the first person to ever give me an individual audition.
Oh my god!
Because he had just aged out and he helped for like that one camp. I didn't had any idea at the time that we would like work together later or that we would interact more.
Life come full circle.
Yeah, it was pretty wild.
That's crazy.
But that was how I got into it, and
And despite getting your eyes opened at that first experience, you were hooked, weren't you? I bet.
Well, it was like it made me mad that I wasn't better. You know what I mean? Like sometimes people get really discouraged, and I was discouraged, but I was like, well, I mean,
you were hungry at the same
time.
time.
Like these other guys, like they had to be bad at some point, right?
Yeah.
Like, they weren't born with golden sticks in their hands.
That's what my first audition experience was like with the Blue Coats in 2009. I was that big fish in a small pond at my high school in Louisville, and I got to that camp, and like that was Drew Guy's first year as center and stuff, I think, and then. I had no place being there.
You would have been there.
Well, it depends. I wasn't at the November camp.
It was just the November camp.
Yeah, I wasn't at that one.
I did not make it past that experience, but very similar. Sometimes people can take an experience like that as like, well, I just suck. I just need to quit. Like you said, I took it the same way you took your first experience.
Yeah,
humbling.
I was like,
it was very humbling, dude.
I was very humbled by it.
I remember seeing my dad, and he was like, how'd it go? And I was like, really bad. I'm like, terrible at drums. And it was, I remember, the funniest story I remember from that is I was sitting, we were in this classroom, and they had divided the snare drums up into like 3 rooms, and I somehow made it into like the middle room.
Wait, so you were auditioning for snare drum?
I was also a snare drummer back then. I hadn't seen the light yet. My left hand didn't know what it was doing. And I'm a quad player for anybody that... Yeah, so I was auditioning for snare drum. So I'm in this room. There's like 60 of us in this tiny little classroom, like packed into this thing. And they had 8 snare drums up at the front. They were like the old I2 drums with like the White Max Evans heads.
Yeah.
Way back with like the XL carriers and all that. And so we had those drums set up. I was sitting at a desk like with my practice pad. And I think it was like Ellis Hampton and Nick Thomas were like running the room. And it's funny again because fast forward, and we'll get to that in a minute, I ended up working with Nick Thomas like a couple years ago at Phantom Regiment. Totally weird that like we, cross paths again. But so we're in this room and Ellis is working and he's like, all right, we're gonna work on the triplet grids. Everybody know the triplet grid, like we're cool. I had never heard those 2 words next to each other in my entire life. So I was like, and everybody in the room was like nodding, like, yeah, totally. And I was like, it's a triplet grid, of course. Like, yeah, whatever. And so I had no idea. So they started doing, he was like, all right, we're going to start with just the 4s. And I was like, I don't know what that means. Luckily, I wasn't on a drum. I was like sitting at a desk. So I could like kind of fake it like, oh yeah, I'm going to like evaluate,
figure this out.
Yeah. And so I'm looking at this thing and the 4s like kind of make sense. I knew triplets and everything. Like I wasn't like an idiot, but I didn't know the process. So like I watched the 4s a couple times and like, okay, I kind of understand what's going on here. And they said, all right, add the 2s. And I was like, there's more to this? And so they start doing the 2s and I'm like drumming along and I don't really get it. And then they started the ones, and I was like out. I had no idea. Yeah, like I had no idea what was going on. So they're playing, and I'm just like trying to just play good triplets on my pad and like not look like a total idiot in front of everybody. And I look over to my left, and there's a kid sitting next to me that like looks about my age, and he is like in the same boat. And he's like looking at me, and we like make eye contact, like, do you know this? And we kind of like both shrug our shoulders, like, I don't know what's going on. And so we're like, all right, we're in this together, pal. Like,
we're gonna go down together.
Yeah. So I found out later that kid sitting next to me was Dave Oriente.
Oh my gosh!
I swear to God. And I knew that because he was at X in 2010 with us, and I told that story, and he was standing next to me, and he goes, "That was you?" Like he remembered the whole thing. It's pretty wild.
I still think it's crazy. He marched Pioneer before he did Blue Stars.
Oh yeah.
He was on tour with. Well, I think he quit halfway through. Like he just like.
I think he quit. Yeah.
He was infinitely better than anyone else. I don't know why he ended up at Pioneer in 2008 because that dude was a very good snare drummer, and
I don't know.
How you end up at Pioneer.
I would love to find him and ask him because I've looked for him for the last couple of years.
He's in the military now.
Is he?
Yeah.
I haven't been able to find him.
Dave, talk to us.
Yeah. Come back.
Anyway, so that was like my first audition experience. It went horribly, but I learned a ton, and I was like super hungry for more. And so I was determined after that camp I had like some direction. And more like for me personally, more importantly, I knew what I was up against at that point. Like
what the bar was.
I had kind of like seen behind the curtain of like what the standard is.
What was expected.
Yeah. Well, because I always thought like, well, I can like play the music. Like that's good enough.
Yeah.
And they're like, we're working on skills. And I was like, what are those? You know,
that's kind of like,
yeah. Like, what do you mean I have to know what accent tap is? Like what a downstroke is.
Yeah. That's like kind of the advantage of the internet now. Like back then, like when we were auditioning and like you were talking about the internet like hadn't blown up, like you didn't have this open web of just like information. You can see all these groups and all these videos. It's just like you were a product of your environment.
And that was it.
That's it. That's your only option.
Kids nowadays have access to everything.
It's great.
It's an awesome thing.
I think it's great.
An awesome thing.
Some people are like, yeah, back in my day. It's like, no, I think it's awesome. Like we had to work harder, I think, to find those resources. But I think now, I feel like the drummers now are better younger because of all the resources that they have.
For sure. 100% agree.
But so that was like my first audition experience. So I went back and I was back in high school, and then finished my next 2 high schools. And when I was a senior in high school, a friend of mine that I had met at EKU's Eastern Kentucky University's Foster Music Camp, his name was Dylan Combs, which you guys know.
Yep.
He's a good buddy of mine, and we met each other at that music camp when we were still in high school. And he said, "Hey, I'm doing this drum line. It's an indoor drum line. You should do it. Like we need snare drummers." And I was like, I don't know what indoor drum line is. Like I had just kind of over, a year or two kind of figured out what drum corps was and was a big fan, but I had no clue about what WGI was. And he said, "Well, you should come check it out." And so it was a little independent open line, and it was supposed to be from Athens, Kentucky.
Yeah.
So the name of the group was West Athens.
And your introductory
and
to...
that was my introduction to WGI, was West Athens in 2006.
And Justin Fisher.
Justin Fisher was there, yeah. And there was a quad tech, was JJ Martinez.
JJ.
There was a guy...
I think he marched Lone Star.
Marched Lone Star, yeah. He was back in... He marched with like Brian Perez way back in the day.
What's so crazy about that indoor group, because we've had guests on here already before that brought that up, like Dan.
Oh, you had Dan, yeah. That was where I met all those guys. Yeah. Like that whole group of us.
What's so crazy about that group, how insignificant that group was at the time, how many amazing people in the activity started in that group.
Well, it was a very odd experience, because for a lot of us it was like our first WGI experience. So I didn't even know what the first WGI show I ever went to, I performed in. You know what I mean? Like I had never even heard of it. I didn't know.
I think that was actually me too.
I watched Tate's Creek.
I remember watching, like, I looked up this, like, Vic Firth started to host videos back in the day, like vicfirth.com. Yep. And so I remember looking up on there, and there was videos of like Rhythm X and some other people and whatever. And I was looking, and I was like, they were like outside in like a parking lot, and they were like grooving
gravel all around.
Yeah, and I was just like, I mean, I didn't realize it was like the Nutter Center or whatever now, but I remember watching it, and I was like, what is this? This is so strange. It was like very foreign to what I thought.
Like the old Blue Knights are wearing like machine gear and stuff or something.
Yeah, it was just, there's costumes, there's props everywhere. So it was just like a different thing that I didn't really know about. So Dylan tells me I should do this thing. I'm like, all right. So I showed up and I like auditioned for the group by basically just like playing in the snare line for a day. And they needed snare drummers and I wasn't terrible. So I was like, all right, let's do this. Now, flashback to my high school. When I was in high school, we didn't have an indoor drum line. We only had outdoor. And I played quads in high school. So I did it for 6 years in high school. I played bass drum my first year, played top bass, and I was a total baller. No, I wasn't. And then when I was in 8th grade, I was the snare drummer for the band, singular, one. And then in 9th grade, I played snare drum again. And then the last 3 years when I was in high school, I played quads. But I wanted to play snare. I was like, I wanted to, I wanted to be one of them like flam drag fighter pilots. Like that's what I wanted.
we get all the glory unless it's the quad feature, man.
Right. So I wanted to do that, but I was like pretty decent at quads. I had an instructor in high school that told me, he was like, you need to stay. He was like, you need to stay with quads. And I was like, no, man, I want to do snare drum. I want to do it, And he was like, he said, good snare drummers are a dime a dozen. Like you need to like stick with quads and that'll be better for you. But that's a whole nother thing. So anyway, so I was playing snare drum with this group, West Athens, and it was fun, or I thought it was fun. I didn't know any better. And the show was like harder music than I had ever played in like a show before. So for me, it was cool. But yeah, like I was in that group. Dylan was in that group. Ben Thompson, Dan Schmidt.
Ted Leith.
Ted Leith was the center snare. Yeah, there was a lot of people that ended up doing stuff in the Battery, especially. I could do an entire one of these podcasts on the just history and the story of like that group.
Yeah. Dan Schmidt kind of elaborated a little bit
just on how
it was. Yeah, there was a ton
the shenanigans,
and it was it was a little bit of a mess, and it was a new group. I mean, every new group that starts out has its own issues, but
it was kind of your segue from like high school band into something.
It was the first independent group that I'd ever done that wasn't affiliated with high school, so it was like a little more mature. Some of the kids were in college. You know what I mean? It was like a little bit older. And it was a nightmare, and we were awful. And it's fine. Like,
but it was great.
I think everybody needs to go through that at some point, like to be in a group that's not that good. Because it brought us closer together, and I learned a lot. Like the tech staff there was good. Justin is awesome. JJ was the quad tech, and he was awesome. And so I started out on snare drum.
JJ who?
Martinez.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I started out on snare drum, and we needed a quad drummer. And so they said, okay, we need to see if anybody has quad talent or whatever. Okay, so they like, I was on the end of the snare line, so like booted me over to the side. And I started playing quads, and I wasn't terrible. So like then I just magically became a quad drummer. Like that was, they never put me back. I was like, well, here we are. And it was
hate me forever.
Yeah, and it was fun. I ended up enjoying it. And so, I realized like I played quads in high school. This had happened. So I went to school for music at Eastern Kentucky University, and I decided to play quads there, like in the marching band. And I just decided I'm going to be a quad drummer. So I had tried out a couple times at Cavaliers on snare drums, like a couple years in a row. And it just wasn't working out. I couldn't, I wasn't that great at snare drum. And so when I started to play quads is when things kind of took off. So I went to music school for music ed at Eastern Kentucky University. And it was awesome. Had a great time. I met a lot of really cool people. We got to do some really great concerts and stuff. And that's, a whole nother thing. But marching wise, I stuck with quads. And so the next year in 2007, I had tried out at Cavs one last time on quads this time. That was after Jim Casella and all those guys had taken over. Yeah. It was their second year. And it was cool. It was like a different take on drumming that I had never seen before because I was raised in like the Cavaliers wrist turn like era. And this was like a new sort of organic style of drumming. Yeah, it was like this very strange approach that I had never really seen. The snare drums are all cockeyed, and I was like, what's going on? And now I teach Blue Stars where like we do the same thing. But so it was interesting to like get that side of it. And I decided I didn't make it at Cavaliers, and I decided not to like keep pursuing marching that particular summer. I had a job over the summer being like a cameraman for a production company, and we got to travel around and do stuff. That's a whole wild thing. But so I didn't march that summer. So going into the next year, I really wanted to march. This is when, Paul Rennick was still at Phantom, and what they were doing was starting to get like really well known. They won drums in 2006. They were awesome in like 2005, 2006, 2007 was awesome. I was a big fan of that. And so in 2008, I said, that's where I want to march. I think that's where I'm like settled on that I really want to march. So I tried out there, and I didn't make it again. And it was close. Like
didn't
I had
march in 2007 though?
I didn't march in 2007.
What am I thinking of? Whatever, go on. Sorry.
So I had tried out there, didn't make it, but I learned a lot. And again, that was like even a newer, like a different approach again of drumming,
especially to quad drumming.
Yeah, for sure. So it opened my eyes to like some ways of drumming that I had never thought of before. And so I ended up that same year, I was like, I still really want to march. My buddy Chris Koenig had marched Colts the year before in the front ensemble. He was like, dude, you need to come to Colts. He's like, you'll have a great time. You'll learn a lot. And so I went to Colts and I ended up making it at the first camp. I was super stoked, like got my contract in the mail. Nice. And I was like, oh my God, like I can't. I was like super excited. And then I read it and I was like, oh, this is a lot. Like I'm super nervous.
Is this happening?
And so I made it and it was awesome. I had a great time there. I learned a lot. Max Melanix was the quad tech or caption head. Mark Hunter was the quad tech and he did a lot of stuff with the full battery as well. And so that was like my first drum corps experience was the Colts back in 2008. And we didn't make finals. I think we were like 14th overall or something like that. But I just learned a ton.
You spent an entire summer drumming.
Yeah,
it's
every
crazy,
day.
It's crazy the transformation you make your first summer.
It's like, pretty wild.
That first summer and your ability to move and play or move.
And just to process information and like...
Well, and for me, it was like a dream come true. And I actually almost got sent home because I had a knee injury, like during move-ins. So it was like I was out for like a couple days.
Dang.
And I just pushed through it, and it was terrible, and it was like the worst pain in my entire life. But I mean, I say I pushed through it. I didn't like do things that I shouldn't have done, but I had to like just deal with a lot of pain, and it sucked. And a lot of it stemmed from being just like really out of shape. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I realized the value of like being in better shape after that, you know. So I marched that summer. I came back like a new person. I was a lot more mature. I had all this performing and drumming experience. I was way better at drums. I was like, you know, I had lost like 40 pounds. I was like a new person. You know what I mean? Like people, when I got back to college at Eastern, people like literally didn't recognize me. Like my friends would walk past me and then stop. I'm like, oh my God. And it was awesome. I loved it. And I had a great time. So that next summer, I ended up, the shortest version, the percussion studio was taking a trip to Brazil. And I was going to go on that. So I wasn't going to march in 2009. And then I decided kind of at the last second, I had tried out for Rhythm X for indoor, and I didn't make it in the quad line, but I talked to Tim Jackson and those guys, and they said, you should really think about coming out to Blue Coats, because they were taking over after McIntosh and those guys left.
That was the first.
And so I thought about it. I didn't go to the first camp because that was like the weekend of the Colts banquet, and I wasn't planning on marching. And I ended up going to the December camp after talking to Tim a little bit about it. And I really it was like super fun. It was like a whole new vibe.
Yeah, McKenna was there. And
Mike Tim McKenna Jackson was a quad tech. Tim Jackson. Mike Jackson was the caption head. Eric Shriver was the snare tech or one of the snare techs. And so it was awesome. I had such a good time that I was like, I have to do this. If I get a spot, I need to do this. And so I got a spot and I was like, I got to do this. I'm not going to Brazil. I'm going to do this. And so I did that. I came back the next year and aged out there as a vet. I was the quad section leader in 2010. We medaled for the first time. It was like a fantastic year. In the first time in core history. Yeah, in 2010. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's all right. I got mine the year before.
So we, but it was fun. It was both summers were so much fun, and I just felt like I got a lot better. So after 2009, knowing Tim and those guys, and I was in Kentucky, they were like, you need to come out to Rhythm X. And I'll try out, and so I did, and I made it in the quad line there in 2010, which is where Evan and I think we knew each other before.
We had met just through the small network
because we were in Kentucky
drummers, but yeah, that's like where we really started like hang out. Obviously, when we both made Rhythm X, and I actually had gotten invited by Dylan. He invited me to go.
Classic.
And you got the spot.
Well, Dylan and Dean, because I knew Dean from Moorhead.
So anyway, so that's where we met, and then I was at Rhythm X. 2010 and 11 in the quad line.
That's where Adam and I met, was 11.
Yep.
Because Mike came up.
Yep.
And so that's like a super long version of like how I kind of got into drum corps. The shorter version after that is how I started teaching. Was Mark Hunter was a friend of mine from, he had taught me at Colts, and he contacted me in 2010 and said, hey, are you interested in teaching? And I said, absolutely I am. And it was just one of those like kind of right place, right time. He asked me if I had aged out. I said yes. And he said, all right, I'll have something for you later. So
and he was
he ended up being with Shane Gwaltney
Okay.
When Shane took over as the caption head at Phantom Regiment.
After Rennick
left for Vanguard. And so when he called me, I thought like, all right, cool. I'm going to be like the second alternate quad tech at like the Teal Sound Bandolier Guard Cadets or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like some kind of super obscure or whatever.
Div 2, whatever they're calling
it. I didn't think that it was going to be a position of any consequence whatsoever. And he was like, all right, so Shane's going to talk to you, but we're looking for a quad tech for Phantom. And I was like, whoa, I didn't expect that at all.
They just won drums last year.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, these are some big shoes to fill. And so that was like my first teaching experience was 2011 Phantom Regiment. I didn't do the whole summer. I actually went to India at the end of the summer. So I was gone for like the last 3 weeks of tour doing like a performance thing in India. But it was a great experience. I learned a ton, and I got like you were talking about at the beginning, I learned a lot about what it was like on the other side and what the staff has to deal with. And
so kind of, we'll start there too. Like, so you obviously got the gig. Like, hey, this is when auditions are. So you showed up at auditions to watch people audition.
Right. Yeah.
I always got the impression that staff at the November camp, it was more of like a reunion party weekend than it was like from their viewpoint. Like, obviously they're educating, they're still doing what they're supposed to do, but there was always an attitude of like nonchalantness about everything. Like they were just.
Let's figure out which kids aren't super terrible.
Exactly. I think, I mean, I will say, like, I definitely can see why it would come across like that. In my experience, it is a little bit of a reunion, because it's the same thing for, like, members. Like, when you march somewhere and you go back to the November camp, like, you see all your friends that you haven't seen in a long time.
Live across the country.
Yeah, like, the staff is kind of the same way. For me, it was like this at Phantom, and now that I work at Blue Stars, I've been there. I was at Phantom in 11, 12, and 13, and then I stepped down after the 2013 summer and took a position at Blue Stars with Eric Shriver. And so I've been there ever since 14. But with Blue Stars and with Phantom back then, the attitude was always, all these students that are coming to audition need to learn as much as they can.
And I feel like that's a switch that has happened in the past like 3 or 4 or 5 years. Because like in the early 2000s, maybe when you were auditioning, and even in 2009 when I first got, I mean, I learned stuff at the 2009 Blue Coats camp, but now they're presented as more of a clinic. They kind of have an idea of what vets are coming back already, clearly. And they kind of have an idea the vets do a little bit of their own recruiting. The staff has their fingers on the pulse of different regions where they're holding auditions. They're very well connected with local programs. And now, like you said, they're clinics more so than audition. That first November.
You said clinics. Did you say clinics?
I don't know. Somebody said
clinics.
But I think it is a little bit like a clinic. I think a lot of times it just stems from like these students are paying so much money, to like register for the camp and to come. Mm-hmm. Like you're gonna pay $150 or whatever it is. I don't know.
Get the packet.
But it's like you want to make sure that the kids that are coming there feel like they're getting their money's worth. Mm-hmm. And I think it used to be because of the nature of the way that the drum corps did camps. They needed to get the talent and keep them immediately, and they wanted to set people as soon as possible. You know what I mean? They had to get that stuff. In
the past, you mean?
Yeah. And now, like, there's so many satellite camps and all these other options that I don't feel like people are as much in a rush to feel like they have to, like, set the line immediately. You know what I mean? And maybe that's incorrect. Well, like, at Blue Stars, we try to set the line in January. But through November and December, it's all recruiting. It's all the satellite camps and all that kind of stuff. And then we try to set the line at the January camps that we have. Like, okay, here is the people that are in the group for sure. And I feel like maybe it was just because there was only one camp. Like, that was it. Like, you went to that camp, and there was 500 kids there trying out for the percussion section or whatever. But it's just a little bit different. And we focus... At Phantom, it was like this, and it's like this again at Blue Stars, that we try to focus on the educational aspect. We definitely want to separate... in our heads, there's 2 things that have to happen. 1, we want everybody to learn a ton. And 2, we want to make sure that we separate for our own sake, for the drum corps. We're separating the kids that we want and the kids that we feel like we need to see later. Like if they have some time, like the callbacks, the kids that maybe give them a month and see how much they improve, and then they'll be ready. Or the like we want to see what you can do in a year off or a year of experience somewhere else before you come back here. So you have to balance that. And it's great over the course of a weekend because we usually start with like very clinic, like this is just an introduction to how we do things. And it's not right or wrong. This is just how we do this at blank drum corps or blank indoor line. And then over the course of the weekend, that switches to like, okay, how well do you fit in with what we do? And how can we separate those people? Sure, you know what I mean?
That makes sense.
So when someone shows up to like November, December, whatever, first camp, and they're auditioning for a spot, like what's something that you look for, like you guys as a staff look for? Like, did they learn the packet? Like, did they do this? Did they do this? It's like, is it more about figuring out if they play well their style and seeing if that's something you can change, or do they adapt immediately to the style that you guys play? Because
it's a large mix of things. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into like the selection process. From the staff side, I'll say for myself, I definitely am looking for. You can just kind of tell, like by the way somebody walks into a room. Like you want people that have a personality. You want people that have, a little bit of a I don't know what it was, a type confidence. A. Yeah, some confidence to what they're doing.
Some swag.
Yeah, I mean, you can call it that. I don't want, you're not coming in doing like the pimp walk to their drum. What's up, ladies? Like, it's not like that. But I don't know. Like, you definitely want that confidence. And a lot of times you can tell a lot just by the way that someone walks up and stands behind the drum before they play a note. Yeah. Just their posture, their sort of demeanor, like what they look like when they stand there. But I would say the number one thing that separates a lot of people is teachability. Their ability to take information, receive it, process it, and then apply it, and how quickly that process can happen. Mm-hmm. And the more someone is teachable, the higher chance they're going to have. Now, you also need to be talented. Like my grandmother is teachable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But that doesn't mean that she's going to be marching
to work with
somewhere.
Still.
Yeah, exactly. Like
she's not playing scrape patterns.
Right, exactly. She's not playing double beat at like 200 or something. But could you imagine like an 80-year-old woman just like tearing it up on some double beat? That'd be awesome. Anyway, so I don't know. Like we look for teachability and the balance of pre-existing talent versus teachability. And the way you're asking about styles, we don't really talk. I think maybe back in the day people talked a lot about like, well, we have to have this look or whatever. My whole approach has always been, I want to teach you what I feel like is the proper technique. And the way that you like quote unquote look when you drum is a result of that, rather than trying to look like something and then apply the technique, if that makes sense. Like if you play with this technique, it's going to make you look a certain way, and that's why the groups look the way that they do, rather than you try to play and fit the way you look when you play into that.
Yeah.
And I know like that was a mistake that I made when I was in high school, was like I watched Cavaliers and I wanted to look like that. And instead of trying to think of how they played, I tried to look at the way that they looked when they played and try to recreate that.
I remember I did that when I went to a Phantom audition. I was like, oh, they have this like kind of like flowy like arm. Yeah. I tried to like imitate that.
I'm going to like feather tap the drum and like pretend like I'm moving my arms more and not get any sound quality. Like it doesn't work. It doesn't do anything.
Exactly.
So it's, I don't know. I think it's just, that's a common mistake that I think people make a lot of times. And so it's the balance, like I said, of teachability versus pre-existing talent. The style and that kind of stuff. I mean, if you see somebody that comes in and they're like for Blue Stars, for example, like we have a very ergonomic technique. So it's very relaxed. So things move. Like if you move your wrist and your arm happens to move, it's not that big of a deal. We're not going to like pitch a fit about it. But some people come in and they're like way overdo it. They're like monkey drumming. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then you have somebody that comes in and they're like super square and they don't move their arms at all. Both of those things are things that I think that you can work on. So it's more about like, how do they turn their wrist? What's the sound that they can get? What's their vocabulary as it stands right now? And then are they teachable? Because if they're teachable, they're going to be able to get the style. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Over the long term. So that I feel like if I had to boil it down to the simplest thing, it would be that.
Do you think being on tour as a staff member is more stressful than being on tour as a member?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. I think in some ways yes, and in some ways no.
Well, physically, it's definitely less stressful.
Physically, it's way less stressful as a staff member. I mean, depending on where, like at Phantom and at Blue Stars, we have like, the sleeper bus, which is pretty awesome. Well, just, you get to lay on your back when you sleep. You don't have to get up in the middle of the night to like move all your stuff inside. Like, that stuff I think helps a lot But for me, like being on staff, that helps me feel like I can teach better.
Yeah.
Because I am more relaxed and, I'm like better in the mood.
Like I've had a couple people that asked me before and stuff, just like, oh, would you ever teach? I've had like one offer, like, hey, would you ever be interested in this? I've never really thought about it just because with my job and stuff. It's like, no. But like, then I sit down and think about it, like, would I want to? And I think like as a member, I was always just like, man, this is just what I did. I woke up, I drummed, I ate, whatever. I just did. Like I was in like a robot.
Yeah,
basically.
It's like a military mindset.
But I just imagine that I said like a staff member, it'd be a little more stressful because like you were hired to maximize this section of this group to its best ability, and it's your job to figure out how to do that. It's like, how to get these 4 people,
and you're like, we just had 3 bad shows
together.
in a row. What's going on? Like, we just had 3 bad shows. What am I doing wrong? How do I fix this? What's going on in their heads?
Sure.
Like, having to read the situation all the time.
I think it can be, it's definitely more like mentally taxing, I feel like. Because like you were just saying, like when you're a member, people tell you what to do at all times. Like play this music, stand in this spot on the field, and go to that spot in 8 counts evenly. Like it can't be any easier than that. You know what I mean?
Just do what you're told.
And then we're gonna do this 100 times or whatever. We're gonna do this, and then we'll tell you what to do next, and then we'll tell you when to eat, and then we'll tell you when to sleep, and then we'll tell you when to do your laundry. And that's why you see members, they have a free day. You walk into a gas station and you're just like staring at the sodas, and you're like, what do I get?
Yeah.
Like I have a choice. Like
somebody
I have to
tell me what to do
like
here.
somebody give me something so I don't have to think. And so I don't know. You get used to that a little bit as a member. And it becomes very routine. And as a staff member, the same thing happens. It is refreshing sometimes as a staff member because, like they'll do Vig Block in the morning. And so like the drum staff is away from that. And we'll kind of watch from a distance and sometimes we'll be involved, especially like once they know the drill, we start to drum while we're out there. So we'll be kind of around, still visual focused, but the drum staff is like around to make sure that everybody's playing well. Yeah,
Make sure a section doesn't cut Vig Block.
Exactly. So
guilty.
So in some ways it can be, you have a little bit more time to like kind of gather yourself and your thoughts and plan.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what, every staff kind of has that time depending on what part of the day and so on. It depends also on what your job is on staff. Like when I was like just a quad tech, it was very similar to being a member. Like the caption head would just tell me what we were doing
for this long.
Yeah, you're in subs, whatever. And that was like subs was like the only time that I felt like I had to like be on whatever because I had to plan what we were doing.
Yeah.
So I would think, and you just keep a little list. I had a little notebook that I would keep and just write in it like, okay, we suck at, B to C or whatever in the closer. And so then when it was subs time, it's like, all right, we need to hit this and we need to play the quad solo like 100 times and then we're going to run over and play with the snares. Like, so it was, you only have to plan those short bursts sometimes as, just like a section tech. And then as you move up, like the higher you go, the more you have to coordinate with the other sections and things like that. But honestly, it's not, depending on the facilities, it's not that hard. And, the staff, especially right now at Blue Stars, I was only the quad tech when I was at Phantom, so I can't really speak to how well the staff kind of coordinated with each other. But like at Blue Stars, the staff is also like it's cool because we're very professional because we all know each other as like colleagues, but we've been together for so long that we're all like really good friends now. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So there's like a level of respect there from staff member to staff member of, we're all professionals and we want to make sure that we handle ourselves that way, but we can also pal around and joke around and it's, it's fine. So it's nice to be able, I can talk to if Eric is off tour and I'm like kind of in charge of the battery for a little while, I can talk to the brass caption head and we're like, cool. It's not weird. It's not like, there's no weird. Yeah. There's no, like, we're really good friends. And so like, if I tell him like, hey dude, is it possible for us to get the stadium field? Like, I know that we had it yesterday, but we really got to balance and we got to use whatever. And he's like, yeah, whatever. Like, fine, sure. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a big deal at all. And
that's good.
So, I mean, I'm sure that varies from staff to staff, depending on where you go. I've definitely heard...
how long you've been together, I guess.
True. I've definitely heard plenty of horror stories of, like, people that don't get along and terrible things like that. Luckily, I haven't really ever experienced things like that. I mean, you have time... just like when you're a member, you have times where you get mad and things are... They don't seem like they're doing the right thing.
You're going backwards or something.
Yeah, and you don't... maybe you don't necessarily have the power to change it and you just kind of feel frustrated, but... I think that's true of over the course of any summer. And as long as you keep a sense of humor about it and you kind of keep a light tone about it, it's fine. You can always tell. I think as a staff member, like 14 to 16 days is like the max for me personally that I can do on tour before I start to get a little crazy. And you just get, everything becomes so much more important all of a sudden. Because your life is just invested in that. When you have like that, like 2 weeks, maybe a little bit, like 2.5 weeks, it's still just like, all right, this is cool. Everything's fine. And then everything starts to get like, you get like grumpy mode where everything is just annoying. And you're just like, can you believe that he came in a count early? Like, what a it's like, it becomes a personal attack at that point on you as a teacher. And if you can balance that, and if you can keep a light sense of humor, it has something to do with, you know, like I said, like with the way the other people are. Like the other drum staff at Blue Stars are like some of my best friends in the world. We have such a good time together. And so that helps that we're like bros. So like Caleb Gastiger works with the bass drums there. Him and I marched together at Blue Coats. We're really good friends. One of the funniest people I've ever met in my life. But we're good enough friends that if I am being grumpy about something, he can come over to me and tell me like, hey dude, you need to calm down. Yeah. Or, you know what I mean? And it's like, all right, you're right. I need to relax. Whatever.
That's good.
So it really, you know, it depends on the group of people and like you said, like how long you've been together. But in my experience, it's been very positive. In terms of like a straight answer of if it's more difficult to be on staff than a member, I would say yes and no. It's just, you know, as a member, it's more difficult physically. Your body is put through the ringer on all kinds of stuff. As a staff member, you have a lot of fun. There's more downtime. You get to kind of enjoy like traveling with your friends a little bit more than like you're sitting on the bus like trying to drum through the opener again or whatever. But you still, you know, there's still definitely plenty of challenges. Like you said, like you have to think, okay, I've got to think outside the box. What resources can I use to be creative and make sure that these kids are getting the most out of this experience and we can get over the plateau of the middle of the season or whatever.
Yeah. It's July now.
Well, yeah, and I mean that's a natural thing.
That plateau's a real thing, man.
It happens.
3 months doesn't sound like a long time, but when you're in it every day, 12 hours a day, it's a long time.
And that's the thing. It's like Joe Hobbs said it best. He said, and I don't know if he was quoting someone, if this is original. So Joe, if you're listening, I apologize if I attributed this to the wrong person, but
I gave you credit.
I just remember he always said, we worked together at Phantom, and he always said long days and short weeks. Like the day seems so long, and it seems like, you know, you wake up in the morning and it seems like it's going to be an eternity until the night block. And then all of a sudden it's Saturday. And it's a regional day. Yeah, and like it just goes so fast. And having, I don't know, that's just like a very odd time because it's like you always feel like, God, we have so much rehearsal time, and then you're about an hour away from the end of the day and you're like, oh my God, we need like 3 more hours of rehearsal. Like it's always an odd balance as a staff member for sure.
Gotcha. Well, you've been doing that obviously during the summers, and then I guess then in the fall and spring and stuff you're working high schools and writing and arranging now, and kind of gotten into that. And you mentioned previously. Did you have something, Mike?
Well, I was going to say, before we move on from the audition process and I'm talking about being a staff member and whatever, I want to try to go to like the activity as it is now eventually to close out this thing. But what's the funniest thing you've seen happen at audition camp as a staff member?
The funniest thing?
The funniest, craziest thing.
We might have to pause this. I'm going to think for a second.
We didn't give him prep on this
one. Yeah. Oh my God. The funniest thing. I don't know. I mean, a lot of times it's just the way people behave is funny. It's funny, like, I understand so much more as a staff member about the way auditions work now. Yeah. Like, it's such a head game when you're a member and you're auditioning. Like, you are in, it's like psychologically awful. It's like this terrible thing where
you're trying to drum, but you're also trying to fit in. And
yeah, like you question every single thing. And the staff, a lot of times, one, isn't really being as scrutinizing as you think they are. In some ways, sometimes we are. But a lot of times, like, I always tell people at the camps, what I always say is, I give them, like, audition tips. Like, these are the Adam Norris audition tips for how not to make the staff angry. Yeah. Like, don't walk up to us and say, what can I work on? Like, well, we've been drumming for 3 hours.
Drum better.
What have we been working on? Maybe start there. You know what I mean? Or, like, I don't know, just stuff like that. Like, we give audition tips. God, funniest thing that's happened when somebody is auditioning.
Like have you gone into like the individual like auditions with them, like playing by themselves, or like you always in the groups?
Story from Josh Brickey before.
We've told
that story. So like anything like that you've ever experienced where like just
I had a guy audition. What was funny was I won't say his name. If he's listening, he'll know I'm talking about him. I love the guy to death. But I remember he was really good, and I remember watching him audition like in the group, and I remember thinking like, all right, this guy, he looks good, he sounds good when he plays, you know, he agrees with the rhythms, and like he's doing all the right things. But he was so nervous, and I try to be a super nice guy. I don't feel like I
take the pressure off.
Yeah, I want to try to make it as informal as possible because you know, staffs always say this, like, we want to see the best version of you as possible. Like, I want you to make my job difficult. I want everybody to be their best so that we have to make hard decisions on who we want to take. And so this guy comes in to audition for quads, and we go into the individual audition. And like I said, I try to be super informal. Like, hey, how's it going, man? Tell me about yourself. Like, let's talk for a second. You know, it's super cool.
Yeah, get
and
jitters out.
This dude, his hands were just shaking. Like, it was like he could not hold the sticks.
This is my shooting hand.
Yeah, exactly. He was shaking so bad, and it was hilarious because he was a good kid. Like, I was like pretty convinced that he was going to make it.
Yeah, and
he like his hands were shaking so bad that he couldn't hardly hold the sticks, and you know his voice is like quivering. I'm like, hey man, like it's all good. Like, we're cool. Just chill. It's fine. And I asked him to play something, and it was so bad. It was like one of the worst, and I'm like, I know that that's not how he plays, and I knew that he was just...
Because you watched him play with the group.
Yeah,
for like
I'd seen him play for like previously. 2 days, and he was killing it. And then he plays in front, and he freaked. He had like a breakdown, and I was like, hey man, it's all good. And I said, you need to relax. I said, we're just gonna wipe that. We're just gonna delete that from our memories. We're just gonna forget that exercise even happened. I want you to take a deep breath and play it again.
Did you tell the kid? Like, not that...
I didn't tell him at the time that I thought he was going to make it.
Well, yeah,
but I didn't want him to have a bad audition. I'm like, I'm not just going to write him off because he like got nervous. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and that's true. You can, because I kind of had a similar experience when I was at Bluecoats in 2012. I had already marched Rhythm X for a year. Like, I marched with Joe and Tom, who was the center that summer, and like half the staff already knew me and stuff from Rhythm X and whatever. But I hadn't done an individual audition in 2 years. Because at X and 11, because there was going to be only one vet, everyone did individuals. But 12, we basically knew the snare line before the camp started. So there was no individuals for any of us in 12. That's so true. When I went in, Mike Jackson was the only one there. It was just me and Mike Jackson for my individual that first Thanksgiving weekend. I had myself. Like, I played worse than I probably played before in years. It was so bad, rhythmically, tempo-wise, like, and I was just nervous. So it can happen to anyone.
Oh, yeah.
Like, Mike Jackson's an intimidating figure anyway, but he's like a subtle intimidating. Like, he's not a physically imposing guy, but like the way he carries himself, like, he's just an intimidating guy. It's hard to put into words. And
no, I understand. I mean, I marched under for 2 years, man. Yeah, trust me, I know what you mean.
It's just how he is. And so I had myself in the audition, and he said at the end of it, he goes, and I was honest with him. I was like, look, Mike, I can play way better than that. I was like, I don't know what's going on in my head. I haven't done an individual in like 2 years. And Mike was like, yeah, like in the snare room, like you've been fine. Like everything's going well. Like it's all good. Luckily, they didn't hold it against me. That's my point with this.
Sure.
If you can have a bad individual, like if you're auditioning and you like kind of, every time you're playing in front of staff is a new opportunity to show them how good you are.
Well, and that's
what you can erase a bad individual by throwing down in the snare room or whatever. Or,
I always say that it's never too late to play well. Especially in an audition camp. Like, it's never too late to, like, relax and just play comfortably. And that was what happened with this guy. I mean, it was... And ultimately, he was just really freaked out for some reason. I think he just really wanted to make it. He had some experience, and I think he wanted it so bad that he, like, psyched himself out. And some people... I mean, I can't speak for other groups because I don't know what it's like. I know some people put a lot of stock in the individual auditions. And I do, too. Because that tells a lot with how well someone can play. Like, you can reveal a lot in an individual. Like, oh, I didn't notice that when you were playing with other people. Yeah. I couldn't hear that. But in this case, I could just tell that he was just really nervous. And I said, just take a breath.
Yeah.
And he did. And then the next rep he played was awesome. And I was like, that's the version that I need to see for the rest of the weekend. And then it was fine. And he ended up making the group.
Yep. There you go.
But... yeah, it was pretty funny.
The old individual.
That is always the funniest thing to me is seeing how nervous people are. Especially because, like I said, I try to be not imposing at all. I try to be super chill and relaxed. And
well, that reveals it's crazy how much your mental state can affect your physical performance.
Sure.
And I say all the time, like in professional athletics, like a lot of guys can get to the professional level on a physical capabilities from a physicality standpoint. Sure. They can be fast enough, they can be strong enough, skilled enough. But the guys that play in the NBA or the NFL or make a top 4 drum line or whatever are the guys that have it in their head. And so as a staff member, how much do you guys, is that part of the game? Once the line is set, move-ins is started, like reading each member of your battery, like, all right, we have to, like, not treat kids differently, but you kind of have to read their mental state. Because at the end of the day, they're all there because they're already good drummers. Yeah. It's like you have to understand the ebb and flow of what a member's brain goes through.
It's a much different game than teaching like a high school group.
For sure.
You know, when you deal with school kids, they don't get a choice in the ensemble that they're in. They're in the drum line because they want to be in a drum line, but they might not be the best fit. They might fit better at a different high school, but that's not how it works. Yeah. You know what I mean? For drum corps, and especially like higher level, and you know when you started to get into like the top 12 and stuff like that, you are teaching kids that already have a ton of fundamental information. Almost always they have experience with other drum corps already, so it becomes less teaching and more coaching, and it's more about managing the mental. I mean, we want to do a ton of things from an educational side to teach them to be better at drums and to be better at marching and all that kind of stuff. But you have to manage the mental game because like we were talking about earlier, you have 3 months to get through and you only have, 11 minutes a show to spread out over 3 months. And, as all of us know, there's more than enough work to do in that amount of time somehow. But you have to manage that so much. There's so many groups that the mental monster is what gets them by the end of the season. It's not their physical ability. It's not their chops. It's not the show design. It's that the members and the staff don't do a good enough job managing their mental state to where that they can perform at their maximum potential.
I mean, I relate to that completely just because I went through into my age out summer. There was like a 2-week period in July where I just started playing worse. And it was my brain. I got inside my own head and lacked confidence on certain parts of the show, and I just kept screwing them up. And it wasn't that I couldn't play the part. It wasn't that I couldn't play it with another person. I just got inside my own head from a confidence standpoint, from the pressure of the summer. Like, we were one of the better groups that summer, so trying to win a drum trophy, it just got in my own head and got caught up in it. And then pressures from other members and just the whole environment. And so
that's where it's the staff's job to make sure that they can manage that. And it's our job, one, obviously to equip you with the tools to teach, but it's the staff's job to, one, recognize when that's happening and then manage it and be able to, basically put a handle on it and kind of keep everything under control. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And that is where being on staff is a lot different, like that side of it, because you feel so much pressure like that as a member. I remember like when my age out summer, I was responsible for like the start of almost every movement, tempo-wise. And like the first one we started, that was the Metropolis show. So we were in like opposite corners of the field. So it was like an ensemble timing nightmare. But it was awesome. It was a really cool show. I really loved that show. But I started playing, the drum major started conducting, and the pit played, and then there was like a bass drum run on the opposite corner of the field, and then I had to come in time. So I was dudding. We were like in 7/4, and I was dudding like a dotted 16th note ahead
of the hands.
Of the hands, yeah. So it was just like a total mess.
I'm so glad I never had that responsibility.
But like it was stuff like that, and I was like super nervous about it. And then I said, I remember myself and talking with Mike McKenna and Tim and the other staff, and they were just like, look, like this is your responsibility to do this. And they said, you can. Like we wouldn't have given it to you. Yeah. If we didn't think that you could do it.
The old Tom Hannum, your hands are superior.
Well, yeah, it was, but I mean that was what it was. It was just like you can do this. You can't, like, don't tell yourself that you can't. Like, you are good at what you do. That's why you're here. Live up to that.
And it's like that.
And I heard Josh Brickey say this one time. I heard him say it to a high school group. He said, when the time comes, usually you don't rise to the occasion. You fall back on your training. That's what always happens. This is one of my favorite phrases I've ever heard. He said that like right before the kids went on the field, and I was like, that is freaking brilliant. But I remember hearing that, and that like to me clicked with a lot of stuff that I remember from my past. Because in that moment, I didn't like rise to the occasion and play better all of a sudden You know what I mean? I fell back on my training and I just let the training, do what it was supposed to do. And so it's the staff's job to make sure that the training is adequate. You know what I mean? Because that's what's going to happen. When things go south, when whatever happens, you're not going to, there's too many moving
miraculously
parts. It's not an action movie where like one dude can just figure it out.
Yeah.
No, there's 150. Yeah, there's 150 moving parts on the field that have to be perfectly coordinated. So when something is off or when something goes wrong, like you're going to fall to your training always. And it's the staff's job to make sure that the training is adequate. Yep. So that way, and I would say adequate doesn't accurately represent it, but I mean adequate in the sense like
that it's
enough that you're prepared for whatever is going to happen, and that way, when you go to finals, it's just another day at the office. It's nothing special. You clock in, you clock out, you do your jobs, and you can cry when you get to the top of the tunnel.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. But until
you can
then,
watch it on the DVD.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I always say. You enjoy it on the DVD. If you're like a bottom bass or the end quad drummer, everything sounds terrible to you. Just enjoy it on the DVD. You know what I mean?
Well, cool. Obviously, a lot of great stuff in there, insight from that side, and I guess just to finish things up, we'll kind of get into what you've been up to lately now. Off tour, you said before that last kind of segue, you're like in a lot of writing and arranging now, dabbling into that, getting more and more into that. And you said you're actually writing with Josh, aren't you?
I am writing with Josh.
Cool.
So we are starting. We're trying to get some new clients and stuff, doing some indoor and outdoor writing. For percussion and winds and that kind of stuff. That's like winds is like the furthest thing away right now, but full percussion and drill we have on lockdown. So we're working with a few groups this year. We basically have 3 things that we're trying to do. One of which is currently in development, so I'm going to leave that out.
Okay.
The other 2 things that we're doing. One is we're writing, like we said, and then the second thing is we're developing kind of a clinic series. That works. There's 2 clinics to pick from. One is the one is the performer clinic, which is geared towards like the individual students that are performing. So clinic with your students and talk to them about, how to prepare better, how to practice, how to, different skills and things like that. Just like a general like drum clinic that you would have.
Yeah.
But we're doing it, we're basing it on like a tier of skills and, we have a whole thing for that. And then the second half is the educator series. So that is geared towards the staff and trying to take, especially programs that don't have a ton of resources and whatever, showing them, okay, this is what we believe is the best way to organize a rehearsal, organize a season. You should focus on these things. Kind of just a rundown of like what the season is. For example, there's a school that we're working with this year that has some new direction. And some of the people that are in charge have never had to like direct an indoor line before. And so they're like, what do I do? Like, I don't know anything. And we're like, okay, it goes beyond just like, this is how you teach your kids, or this is how we think you should teach your kids and what you should teach them. It's like, have you, registered for circuit championships? Have you applied for DCI or for WGI? Have you gone on to Tresona and like asked for the rights for your music? And did you order a tarp? Did you order shoes? What are you doing for uniform? Like, all those things that like someone who doesn't have a ton of experience doing that would overlook or wouldn't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's 2 clinics, like we said. You have the educator series that's towards the staff and trying to basically create better teachers so that the students get more consistent. I mean, it's great to like do a clinic with your students and have kids for like a day learn a ton about drumming, but if they're not getting that reinforcement day in and day out at rehearsal, that doesn't really stick.
Teach a guy to fish, he can feed for a lifetime type
exactly
deal.
Yeah, same kind of deal. But so then we also have like we said, like the performer series that is dealt towards the performers as well, which is helpful. We base a lot of the tier of skills on like the Bloom's taxonomy, so like the way that people learn things in general. So instead of being just like, all right, this is a downstroke, whatever, like cool, now you can play accents, it's like this is a thought out way of how we're going to organize the skills kind of in a tier of things, you know what I mean? So there's different tiers, and it takes different mental states and different things to understand each one and how they combine.
Well, cool, man. Yeah. I'm glad that hopefully it takes off and you guys able to get around and make the rounds.
I hope so. So if you're interested, we do have a website. It is +1designs.com. +1 the number 1. So PLUS the number 1 designs.com.
Is it spelled out or not?
Yeah, no, it's not spelled out. PLUS the number 1 designs with an S.com.
We'll put a link to it in the info for the YouTube video.
So we have the website's still under development, but you can access it. There's a couple audio samples on there. Just there's only a couple on there, but it also has contact information. It's got like a little tidbit about the clinic series, what we're trying to do. So it's still in development, but it is active. So if you go to it and access it, there's a way, there's buttons, you can contact us. It's got my personal contact. You can hit a thing and fill out the contact and it'll send it to me. Josh has one. And then there's like the contact one for the website that'll send it to both of us. So people that are interested in, if you're interested in a clinic or thing like that, or purchasing a show or getting us to design or write your show, you can contact us through that and we'll go through that whole process.
Good deal. Makes it easy.
Yeah. That's the goal.
Cool.
Streamline it.
And it's good for, like you said, people who are just like band directors who don't really dabble in that.
Well, right. And that's like our whole, from the writing side of thing, our goal is we want to make your job easy. Like if you hire us to do your show, we're just going to do everything you need us to do.
Yeah.
And, we can help with the uniforms. We can help with the tarp. We can write the drill. We can write all the music. Like everything you need is done.
Cool.
One-stop shop.
Well, there it is.
Sweet. Anything else we want to hit on before we close this sucker out?
I think we basically ran down, especially like we said, it was really good to have the insight of a staffer. The other half, everything we've been doing to date is just lives. Everything we've done to date has just been like, oh, this is the day when like I got my butt kicked on tour, and this is my struggles of auditioning.
Now we get to kick the butts on tour.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But
you damn kids.
Yeah, man.
That was a Josh Brickey impression, wasn't it? These damn kids. Burf Herfman holding down the end.
Oh my god!
Couldn't keep his beads together.
Oh my god!
All right. On that note, we'll close this one out. As always, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel that you're obviously listening to this on. Follow us on Instagram at Aged Out Podcast, and then check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/AgedOutPodcast. And we'll just see everybody next time.
Peace.